For all of you attending, thank you so much for joining us tonight for the Exhibition Opportunities panel. My name is Kevin Jankowski. I'm the director of the RISD Career Center. As you can tell, I've got a little touch of laryngitis, sound a little bit like a squeaky dog toy, so just bear with me. We know that some of the most common questions from fine artists and designers about exhibitions include, how do I find and develop exhibition opportunities? What's out there for me? Who should I talk to? How do I approach them? What do I say? What do I show? What do they want to see from me? And how do I follow up with them? Each of our panelists tonight has a unique background and much experience either working as an artist or working with artists. You are going to definitely gain some great insights from them about the professional art world, locating and creating exhibition opportunities, and also best practices. Before we begin with tonight's program, I did want to make a few quick notes. This is obviously a Zoom webinar, and for your awareness, the guidelines for interaction are posted in the chat. Please note, and this is really important, if you have a question, you can address the question in the Q&A feature. And we really want you to submit questions throughout the program, and I'll be fielding them for our panelists. We also have closed captioning for this program, and you can access that through the icon in the lower portion of your screen. So now back to the Exhibition Opportunity Program. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's panelists. First, we have Dustin Yellin. Dustin is an artist and the founder of the truly amazing Pioneer Works located in Brooklyn, New York. Next, we have Beth Kantrowitz. Beth is really wonderful, a dear friend of the Career Center. Beth is an independent curator, an art consultant, and a gallerist, founder of BK Projects, and also drive-by projects in the Boston area. Next, we have Jarrett Key, another amazing human being, a graduate from RISD in 2020, MFA painting. Jarrett Key is an artist and also the founder of Codify Art. And finally, we have Moira Sims. I'm so delighted that Moira is here tonight. We got connected through the really terrific site Foundwork and a mutual connection of Adam Yokel. Moira is a curator and director of the Anat Ebgi Gallery and also the founder of Octagon. So what we're going to do now in this structure is each of our panelists is going to do about a 3 to 5 minute introduction of who they are, their work, the organizations they work for. And then, as I said, I want you all to be bringing questions to the Q&A feature, and I'll be fielding them for the panelists. And most of the program is going to be about those questions and getting your questions answered. Okay, so I'm going to first start with Dustin.
Hello, my name is Dustin. I'm a small mammal on the earth, an amateur geologist. I have a proclivity for deep time, so I spend a lot of time with rocks. I have a small crocodile in my pocket that I keep, from Mars, that I keep in my pocket to kind of connect me to deep time and deep space. I make a lot of things, so I don't really have my practice is sort of a multi-dimensional practice, and some people call a social practice, which is this thing called Pioneer Works, if anybody's been there. If not, I invite you over for a cup of tea and a banana. And I make sculptures that are sort of like where I try to sort of make maps of consciousness. A lot of my work is around these sort of larger issues, like where do we come from and what are we and what does this mean, and how do thoughts and feelings and sentient beings arise from proteins and whatnot, and how do we explain those feelings and express them through these pictures and sculptures and animations. But then I also make, I'm kind of like a performance artist, so often I'll make a sculpture, like a really beautiful thing, and because I'm very into like old things like cylinder seals and oceanic art and Byzantine and Egyptian and what have you. I kind of study art history, but I think of art history as like many thousands of years ago to now, and try to kind of mix, almost like a DJ, a lot of these things to tell stories. But I often make things that are actually like you want to covet, you want to own. And as soon as someone wants to own it and covet it, and they want to give me a lot of money for it, then I tell them that they're capitalist pigs and that they disgust me. And how on earth could they give me all this money to put an object in their homes when there's 2 wars and not enough clean water and large language models and terrible governance systems, and yet you want to give me a lot of fucking money to put an object in your house? It's disgusting. And then I take that desire for the object and I try to hypnotize them to create support for this larger idea, which is, this community building exercise that is Pioneer Works, which is based on a couple of ideas, really 2 foundational ideas, which is access to culture. So how do we really create access to culture? And when I say culture, I mean the arts and sciences. So the other pillar being multidisciplinary approach to reality. I think our information systems, our knowledge systems have been commodified, they've been siloed, and so we try to bring all those people together and make all those people accessible to everyone. So my practice kind of like is in a very psychedelic, strange, sifting sands.
Excellent. Dustin, thank you so much. And I'm going to go next to Beth.
Well, I don't, what do you say after that? I ponder these same deep questions. I don't make anything, although I do respect every artist who can make anything. And those deep questions are, I find those answers in artist work. So my career, I started out, I wasn't going to tell you, but I started out as a social worker when I was young, and my dream was to help people and who were in need. And I did that for a while. And my last job was the director of a nonprofit granting wishes to kids who were chronically and critically ill. And after doing that for 4 years, I was, watching kids die and not get better was really difficult. And I thought, where do I go now? And so I started working in artist studios. And little by little, I built up a business where I learned a lot about materials. Somehow, before I knew it, I had a gallery. And I started a gallery called Austin Skirt. And I have to say, those skills, we always think like, what did we do that brings us to where we are now? Those skills of dealing with people and artists, people that want to buy art, people that want to make art, has been a great introduction to this field in lots of ways. And it kind of brings together my love of people and my love of art. But thinking about, Austin Skirt, I was really lucky early on to work with the fabulous Dyke Blair. So I have some wonderful experiences from RISD, and through Dyke Blair, he curated a show for us called Here Comes Rhodey. And it was about who was going to be like what is it called, Kevin? The rabbit that comes down at the racetrack there? Here's Rhodey. And it was going to be like, who's going to be the next superstar that's going to be the next artist that's going to make it. And I never worried about that. I always cared about the artists and what they were making. But it turned out some of the artists we worked with were those people, like Joe Bradley. We had his very, very first show in a group show when he was a senior at RISD. Anina Major, Millie Tibbs, Sophia Narette. I've met some amazing artists through RISD and through the portfolio reviews. And I just continue to love the artists, really the relationships with artists. I do volunteer work at an art studio for disabled artists, which is located in Boston. I worked with Matthew Higgs from White Column. I learned a lot from him about working with disabled artists, and that's a big passion of mine. So I try to incorporate artists with disabilities with artists who have MFAs, BFAs, or untrained. So all of this merges together to say I'm very lucky to do what I do, and happy to be here tonight. So thank you. And I just have to say, our gallery drive-by projects opened 14 years ago. So after Austin Skirt closed, we opened drive-by projects, and my partner Kathleen and I both are big devotees of the RISD students. So stop by anytime you want, or drive by.
Right. Beth, thank you so much for that introduction. I knew a lot of those parts of your background, but your generosity has always been just absolutely amazing, and your kindness to our students as well. So thank you.
You try to follow you, Kevin.
Thank you. Jarrett, Key.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is great. Always nice to be back at RISD working. I am a multidisciplinary artist. Performance grounds all of the various objects that I make. I think about object making as a durational practice. So whether that looks like me making hot combs as a blacksmith, based off the stories of my grandmother talking about her hair as her strength, and using the hot comb to straighten her hair. And this was like this thing that she learned from her mother. And now I make these like, sometimes I make these like 4 feet tall sculptures that can be weapons, it can be bats, it can be so many things, but they have teeth and they're smiling at you, these combs. Or it could be, I do hair paintings, which is also inspired by my grandmother saying, your hair is your strength. And those look like me creating music, soundscapes, and I'm dancing, singing, and I'm painting with my hair literally in front of an audience. For me, those performances are like rituals. Then there's also the cement paintings that I do. So, Italian fresco painting, wet on wet, into the plaster. I essentially do that with cement. I call them my urban frescoes. So in wet cement, I embed pigment, mediums, oil paint, acrylic paint, many things in order to, create images and relief and these kind of painting and sculptural works. I've been in New York for about 11 years, and when I first moved here, the biggest challenge about being an artist was getting your work seen. So, and having people to move a wet painting with you when you needed to take it to a gallery, or when you needed to take it to a framer. When you're like, I'm 22 years old, I'm like, here's my wet painting, love it. So, me and a group of friends came together and we started an organization, an arts collective called Codify Art. And we really did a lot of work over for 8 years, from gallery shows, curating gallery shows and art events, giving workshops at anywhere from middle school to the Whitney, doing open mic nights, doing theater productions, doing various forms of multidisciplinary performance and events, specifically focused on queer trans people of color. It started out as a house party in my apartment, and 135 of my closest friends came. And now, we all have gone off. We've gotten MFAs, many of us, or masters, many of us. We now live all across America. We all are, doing amazing things. And it's really just because we learned from each other. So, that's who I am. I'm someone, I really enjoy doing work with communities. I really enjoy telling people's stories and allowing people to share their stories, because that's how we learn from each other.
Jarrett, thank you so much. And I also had the pleasure of working. Jarrett was in our office even as a graduate student, peer advisor, and your energy and your love of people too. Already tonight, this perspective of individuals who are deep in the arts and are such caring people and such great humans is really refreshing and really exciting. And Moira, I know the same for you, so I'll have you introduce yourself now too.
Thanks, Kevin. My name is Moira Sims, and I work as the director at Anat Ebgi Gallery in New York, in Tribeca. I've worked in different galleries for about 8 years, and I actually first studied art myself. I went to the Pratt Institute, but while I was already in school, I was already thinking about my own work very much in context with other artists, and kind of really organically gravitated away from making my own work, but thinking kind of more creatively about the curatorial process. My very first job out of school was working at a gallery in the Lower East Side. I kind of hopped around at a few, and now working with Anat. Anat opened her gallery in Los Angeles about 12 years ago, and the New York space just opened in January. So I was hired on specifically to be here in New York. Separately from that, I've always been working on several side projects. I do, press writing. I do kind of creative writing for artists. I also founded a curatorial initiative called Octagon. It's a small side project of mine, but very dear to my heart, where I work long form with artists. Usually every single time it's been an artist's first solo show. So someone usually who's a few years out of school, someone from my community, not necessarily a friend, but usually someone who I become kind of close with through the process, where we work together sometimes for up to a year to really kind of refine a solo project, whether that be an exhibition, a text, a performance, whatever kind of direction it takes. And yeah, I would say my kind of career ethos in many ways has been supporting the work of artists in different facets. And yeah, I feel very lucky to be part of this program tonight. I wish something like this had existed when I was in school myself. So, yeah.
Moira, thank you so much. And actually, I'm going to broach the first question. And Dustin, you really activated it for me, which was the context of money in the exhibition world and in the gallery scene. And, everything you described was really powerful. And then I also think, I know for myself, I was a first generation student who, between illustration and fine art, was looking for exhibition opportunities and really thinking, can I make work to sell work, to pay off my student loans, to support myself, to be secure. And so I wonder, in this balance of, yes, you make something and people desire it and want it and they want to pay a lot of money for it, but that also, in creating more work and building up a studio practice, is a necessity to, again, pay for that space, pay your loans back, and establish a really secure life for some people. So what's your perspective on that balance?
Well, I mean, I have to harken back to my younger years.
Yep.
I would say, when I was younger in New York City, and I rented a room from some cat out of the Village Voice, and I built like a little loft in his place, and he gave me a room to paint in, and I would paint all the time and then go out all the time. I was quite wild and kind of meet people constantly. And I was crazy. I was young, wild, desperate, and I would be like, buy, you want to come see my paintings? I'd be like, give me $2,000. Give me $1,000. How about $500? And if people were like, I don't want your fucking paintings, I'd be like, how about I give it to you for free? Because in my mind, the art was almost like a virus. I was like, okay, if I just give them the painting, because your paintings start stacking up in your studio, right? They're everywhere, and you're like, I got to get it out of here. And so I figured if I give it to someone and they hang it on their wall, and 9 people walk in the room and said, this is garbage. But one person walked in and said, I love this. I'd be like, one step closer. And I would do that every single, I was crazy. I was relentless, persistent. I had to have, I didn't hear this sucks. I didn't hear, I have no interest. I only made work to make more work, to make more work, to make more work, and then get it out there any which way I could. And I did that for years. And that thing of just like, there's nothing else you can do. And there's 2 pieces to it. There's the thing of making it, and you're in the studio and you're making it, and that's all wonderful. And then there's you got to get it out there. And I was, and I think maybe still am relentless. I took a lot of that energy into building a nonprofit, thing. But I mean, there's the true thing of, you got to make the work, and then people have to see the work. And that was it. And I didn't care. And I'd be like, come on, give me $500. I don't care. I'll trade you. Take me to the Strand bookstore upstairs and get me some books, and I'll make, I'll give you a painting. I would do anything. And for years it was like that. And the scales kind of changed as I got older. Maybe I still feel the same fucking way.
And for Beth and Jarrett and Moira, what are some of your perspectives on that, especially for someone starting out, just as Dustin said, that balance between the making, getting it out there, supporting yourself. Jarrett, you're living it soon out of school and experiencing it. So,
I mean, even before I went to grad school, I spent like my last year before grad school being like, okay, I'm gonna make 20 small paintings. I'm gonna sell them. Today I need to sell 30 of them. And I would get on Instagram. I had my Excel spreadsheet or Facebook when the Facebook was still a thing and people were using it. And I would write people, hey, do you want this painting? Hey, like I'm doing a sale. Hey, and I sold hundreds of $50 objects over the course of a year. You know what I mean? Really. And it wasn't until like right before I went to grad school, I had my first museum acquisition, you know, and it was like, and I came to grad school with like a little bit of money that could afford, because it wasn't even like, it was cute, but it was like, in retrospect, I was like, oh my God, I should have gotten so much more money for that. But, you know, with money to buy supplies, you know, and it was just like, wow, like, so, and, you know, and also even just these art parties, like the first painting I ever sold, I sold in my house to a teacher for $35. You know what I mean? I was like, how much do you want to buy it for? He was like, how about $35? I said, perfect, it's yours. And I like put it in a little plastic bag for him. I'm sure like a takeout plastic bag for him and signed the bag. And that's what it was, you know? Because it really was just like trying to tell as many people as possible about my work. I think now, you know, I work with 1969 Gallery in New York City. And so it looks a little bit different. You know, I'm still trying to, I don't tend to sell a lot of my own work anymore. My gallery is like putting me in fairs and they're selling my work, and we have solo shows and we have stuff like that going on. But you know, you still kind of have to advocate for yourself regardless. You know what I mean? Your gallery is not going to get your name out there in the way that you're going to get your name out there, you know? And so I really take responsibility, you know, and I'm trying to take more responsibility, honestly, just for how do I actually expand my audience? Like, you know, social media is so saturated. Instagram is so saturated. The algorithm is not helping anyone share their work. So I've been back. I got a digital business card. You know, I'm back out going to every art event again. Like the weather's getting back nice. I'm just trying to meet people and just introduce myself. And actually, it's been really great. It's been really fun. It's also fun too, because you build these relationships with people, and it doesn't have to look like them selling or buying or selling a painting for you or buying a painting, but it really can look like a relationship because you don't know where that's going to take you. Sometimes some of the best relationships I've had with people, I've done things I couldn't even imagine, been places I couldn't even imagine. Like I ended up in Slovenia for a biennial. You know what I mean? So you just don't know.
I love to, Jarrett, how that early energy has almost boomeranged back. Like you just had to get back in that stream of energy as well. So.
Period. Because after grad school, you know, you're like, oh, I'm such an artist. I live in my studio. I'm in my studio. And then it's like, then you move back to New York City. And I was like, it was still kind of COVID-y when I moved back, and it's still COVID-y. But, you know, I'm really trying to get back out there because, you know, it's just been, because you know, the more and more you do it, the more and more fun it is. I realized I know mad people too. I like went away to grad school for 3 years because I was coming in and out of New York, but I know mad people in New York, and it's nice to like, you're at a gallery show and suddenly you're like, you know, 10 people.
Right.
So it's just fun.
And Beth and Moira, your thoughts on this conversation right now?
Go ahead, Moira, you can go. Or you want me to go?
I can go. I mean, I just thinking about kind of being a young artist and self-promotion, I guess that's what we're talking about. I mean, I couldn't agree more with both of everything that's been spoken about already. I think the main way is to have a community. And I think to be an island, to be isolated, to not put yourself out there is a huge mistake if you're trying to be a professional artist. I think whether you're all over social media, whether you're like going to every party, I mean, it's totally up to you. But I think at the bare minimum, being friends with a bunch of artists, being part of conversation, you know, inviting artists into your studio, hopefully inviting curators or gallerists into your studio, just kind of having conversations with people about your work, about their work, in general is like critical. I would say. I also think, you know, showing up for people and being present and going to other people's openings and just being part of things that don't really even have to do necessarily with your work, but just being present in the community is incredibly important. You know, people start to recognize, oh yeah, there's that person who always comes to the gallery. Who is that? You know, or like, oh, there's that person who, you know, they had that one show 2 years ago because I see them every Friday night, you know, I'm going to come to their show tomorrow. I think community is really such a snowball, especially in a place like New York City. I mean, I think it's easy to say, my only perspective on this is from New York City. I don't know as well how that works in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, but I think building your community surely, slowly but surely, is like, or extremely quickly, I don't know, it's like really super critical. I also think, you know, I have several peers, friends, artists I've worked with who feel embarrassed about having a day job and how, you know, really hide like, oh, you know, I'm not going to speak about that, or, you know, I'm not successful unless I'm making all my money from my art practice. You know, I think that's really unrealistic. I think the reality of modern life, I don't know, is like we all need to make money somehow. There's no shame in that. I mean, you don't have to like forefront that, but everyone works. Like, I don't know. I also think that, you know, kind of piggybacking off of that, yeah, it takes a very long time for most people to completely pay for their life just from their art career, and there's no shame in that whatsoever. So, I mean, take as much time as you need, and like, yeah, just put yourself out there socially, but also with your work. I don't know.
I agree with what everybody said. You know, I think I'm the only one that's not an artist, although sometimes I wish I could make stuff. But I appreciate and admire everybody else. I don't think I could make anything as good as everything I see. But I think everybody touched on, and especially what you just said, Moira, was friends and support. I think it's lonely to be an artist. I think you're in your studio making your work, and if you don't invite people in, whether it's friends or curators or people in your community, you know, just from doing tons of studio visits, which is kind of how I learned the most, is so important. And I think sometimes I think that, and I always value and respect the artist that lets us come in, but I always try to be really honest and respectful, because I think it seems like a hard thing to continually make art that you feel good about as an artist, and that you want to share with other people. But there were a couple of things that, you know, what you touched on, you know, it's different in Boston. There's so many galleries in New York and so many museums in New York. And I think Providence, Boston, we're like smaller cities, but there's such a nice art community here. We all support each other as much as we can. And it comes out in going to gallery shows, supporting each other, just showing up. And there's one thing that, you know, there was an artist who went to RISD a long time ago. Her name was Millie Tibbs, and we met her through the RISD art portfolio reviews. And she did the most generous thing for other artists. On her website, she would list other artists whose work she really liked. And honestly, Matthew Clowney, like all these people we met through her, she was such a generous soul to be an artist and then support other people. So whenever we were doing a show and we had like a kind of an idea of what we wanted to show, we would look at Millie Tibbs's website and see, who does Millie Tibbs support? And I always thought that was like the most amazing way to be an artist and to be supportive of other artists. And like what have all of you said, it's like the community, you know, whether it's the curators, which it used to be easier to get people to come to studios and get to openings because you couldn't see anything any other way. Like you couldn't, you know, go to Instagram, you couldn't go to, it was different. And so people still had to come to artist studios to see work and meet the artists. And I think that's changed over the years, but there's nothing like seeing things, you know, in real life. And today we're installing our show today that opens on Saturday. None of you live here, but you could always come. And these two fabulous artists, so they brought in all their work, they priced the work before, and then there was a stack of works on paper. It's two artists that are doing a collaboration together, and there was a stack of works on paper, and we were saying, you know, what's the prices? And the one artist, Kenji, who was there, goes, we didn't price it. I'm like, okay, so it's such a touchy subject. And I've talked to RISD once before about pricing your art. It is such a hard thing. And I don't think you learn that necessarily in grad school or undergraduate school. So we went through all his works on paper, and I felt so bad because I didn't want to insult him. So we always say to the artist, what would you feel good? Because we all take a commission in a gallery. And I'm like, what would you feel good about walking away with for this piece? And he got nervous, and you know, he was like, I don't know. And I'm like, tell me the truth. And it's not etched in stone. If you wake up tomorrow and you want to change the price, you can do that too. But I always feel like he was saying, there was a work on paper. He said, how about $30? And this guy is a great artist. He's had a great career. And I said, absolutely not. He's like, what's wrong with $30? I'm like, it cost you $30 to get here. So no, you can't sell that piece for $30. And so we went through all his works on paper. It took us a long time because I think he had to really think about what went into each piece, and it's, some of them are collaborative. So he has to split it with the other artists. So we had this heart to heart about pricing. And I always think that's one of the hardest things for artists, is how to decide how you should price your work. And I think it's kind of this nebulous thing out there that a lot of times people come to us as the gallery, or me when I'm selling work independently, to help them with pricing. But I think one of the most important things that matters to me is that an artist doesn't walk away thinking like, oof, I don't feel good about that.
Right.
It's hard. But the one other thing I want you to address is, there's an artist that, I don't know if Michelle Grabner. She's a wonderful artist who is in Chicago. We worked with her for many, many years, and she's an amazing role model for just humanity and for making amazing art. And she always says, whatever you have to do in life to make your art, you just have to do. You can't not be an artist when you're an artist. It's in your blood. So she said, if you have to work at a coffee shop, if you have to babysit, if you have to be a nanny, whatever you have to do to make your art, that's what you have to do. And I always think it's a hard life, but I don't think as an artist you have a choice. You just have to, I don't know, you're all artists. You, and probably a lot of you who are listening, is like, it's too deep inside of you not to do that, but you have to survive too.
On that note, if we could gain some other, we've already had some perspectives on pricing and work, but Beth, I think that really opened up a great point about how to guide a young emerging artist about pricing work. I was told, a long time ago by Gallerist, be so careful if your work is really desired and people want to actually sell it for more, because it'll be very hard for you to go back in the other direction as a young emerging artist. So other thoughts on pricing, especially for, again, young, recent graduates in this whole.
Keep it low.
Keep it low.
You don't want to go backwards, and none of us ever do this for money. Like, you never get into this thing for money, right? So like, try not to have attachments and get the work out there. That's what, and don't, make it accessible. I think, especially when you're just getting out of school.
And I think the other thing is, what you're saying is make it accessible. But the thing that's always curious to me is that you can't sell your work at one of your galleries for $500 and then sell it somewhere else for $200. Because people, you have to just be consistent. Like, if you're going to price your work at $500 when you start out, then that's the price that you have to sell until you decide to raise the price. We've had many artists come, and sometimes their work is so overpriced that it's not fair to them. It's not, because nobody's going to buy it. And I feel the same. If I were an artist, I would want my work out there. But then some people underprice their work. So it's the intimate part of being in a relationship with an artist and trusting each other that I think, giving guidance really, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I can certainly speak to this. I mean, I work in a commercial gallery, and my perspective is just my own, but I think I would definitely, as an emerging artist, price your work low. I would say, I don't know, I don't even want to put a number out there, but like, yeah, I would definitely not price it too low. Depending where you are in your career, let's say it's like your second show or your third show, if your works are like $100 each, like a serious gallery is not going to want to work with you, or they're going to say, we have to raise your prices, because like, from my perspective, like that wouldn't, like, we can't pay our rent, you know what I mean? With that kind of, you have to like hit that right middle point, and that completely depends on what your work is like. Are you making sculpture? Are you making giant paintings? Are you making photography? There's so many nuances to that. I would definitely speak to friends. I would also try to keep the conversation as kind of like an open conversation with a gallerist. So I wouldn't say like, these are my prices and I will not change them. I also would not let the gallerist push prices on you if you feel uncomfortable. I think it should really be something that everyone agrees to. What Kevin said is absolutely right. If someone wants to dramatically increase your prices, let's say you already had some works in a show and you already had a certain price, and the next gallery is like, we want to triple this, I would definitely take it with a grain of salt. I would push back on that depending on those specifics. I think there can be this allure of, oh my God, my work, someone wants to buy this for $10,000, or, it can be really exciting. But I think, we've all probably heard stories, or seen firsthand situations where like a young artist will get kind of caught up in that, and it will, their works will skyrocket in price, and maybe they'll make a bunch of money for a few years, and then like the whole bubble will pop. And exactly as Kevin was saying, then you have to lower your prices. And that's like, in some ways, I don't know. It's really hard to come back from that. A responsible gallerist will not do that. I think, any person, any art dealer knows that that is like very dangerous to an artist's longevity. And I think it's totally irresponsible behavior. I would say, typically what we do, there's no kind of industry standard, but I would say for the most part, prices probably increase, with someone who's regularly showing, who's having, let's say you just started working with a gallery and maybe you had one show, or maybe now you're having your second solo show somewhere. Typically a gallery will raise prices by about 20%, maybe once a year, or maybe like when your next show happens, something like that is pretty normal. But if someone is like, we want a, 400% price increase, that's not normal. And I would definitely be careful with things like that. But yeah, I meet many artists who price their work, I would say, too low. It's challenging for me to come up with a specific number of what would be too low, but yeah, don't undersell yourself either. I don't know. It's challenging. It's hard to find the exact right number. I would really just speak with peers, especially people who make work similar to yours. That would be my starting point.
Yep. And that's a great bit of advice too. And Jarrett, you made a lot of work and put it on Instagram and sold it for $50 and got it out there. How has it changed now with the 1969 gallery and getting gallery representation?
Yeah, I'm not selling work for $50 anymore, for sure.
Right.
But I definitely, I feel like a lot of what Moira is saying is completely like my experience. You have to work with the gallery you trust. You want that price to feel like competitive in the market. You don't want to, you want to get the most money you can get for your work, but you at like the highest amount of buyers. You know what I mean? You want to hit that sweet spot. So obviously overpricing your work can limit the people that want to buy your work. Even if you sold 2 paintings, like, it's still the goal is to sell as many objects as you can when you're having these presentations. And so, so yeah, that's been my experience. I feel like, I think it can definitely feel scary at first when your prices start to raise. Of course, you're like, oh my God, is anyone ever going to buy this work again? But people do buy the work, hopefully. And, you just have to like keep making the work and keep making your best work. And I always say, like, when you're a painter, you're thinking about prices in your studio, like the devil's in your studio. Like, you'll never make a good painting if you're thinking about money. And so just like really, so I feel like I'm lucky as an artist who's working with a gallery that I try to understand what my prices are doing, try to understand what my market is doing, but I really just try to focus on making the best work that I can make, And if I can make the best work I can make, then, it will be successful, period.
But what you just said about the devil's in your studio, sometimes the devil's in the gallery. When people come in and they're like, why is that so expensive? And, I say to people sometimes, we don't sell like super expensive work, but when we do, I feel like telling people, okay, first of all, there's art school, there's a studio, the Devil's Studio, there's materials, there's time, there's so much that goes into a piece. So, and you don't want to stand in front of someone who's in the gallery going, do you know how much that costs? That paint, that tube, that studio, their life, And you can't
Mhm.
say that, and I think that's why it's really important. And I think, all of you mentioned this too, to really have a good relationship with your artists. So you know them really well and you know them. I feel like every artist that we work with and I work with, I feel like I know them. I know where they work. I know their materials, I know what their work's about. And so when people do come in and they ask you, or you're selling someone's work, why is it that much? Or how much does it cost? Or when you're pricing with an artist and helping them, you kind of have to know them really, I think so deeply to help them with pricing and to also educate people who want to buy the work about why the work might cost something. And I think it seems like all of you do that too. But I feel like, we're not just selling and we're not just representing like something that's a product that could be made. Sometimes I'll say that to people. This is a piece that's made by a person and their hands. Like it's an intimate
Come in.
But I think sometimes people forget that this is not a mass produced thing. And then when people come, they go, it's so expensive. I did a show in a little shop and I had paintings in this show that for an artist that were $500 to $1,000, and they sell jewelry and all other kinds of stuff there. And I watched someone buy a $2,000 necklace, and then they came over to the art and they wanted something that's $1,000 a piece, and they were like, "It's $1,000?" I'm like, I wanted to say, I just saw you buy a necklace for $2,000. It's not made by. It's like not even made by someone that's individual. So I don't know. I feel like we are the voice for the artist. So it's our responsibility, as an artist, you have to know the galleries you're working with, whoever you're working with, you need to really know they know you and you know them. And that helps with pricing and all the intimacies that go into working with people.
I feel like I have a few other things to add about this. I think something else to definitely take into consideration with pricing too is production costs. So,
Mhm.
if you're working with really particular materials, if you're, I don't know, if you're working with fabricators, if you're, I mean, I would assume most people straight out of college wouldn't be working with, super expensive materials. But if you are, I definitely think, your costs should the price of your work should at bare minimum cover like your production costs. I've also seen that where people are like, I'm just going to take a hit on this completely. I don't
Mhm.
think that's appropriate or like really ethical. Another thing too, which like feels a little bit silly, but it is just kind of the way that things work. With flat works, with paintings, with drawings, with works on paper, they're always priced proportionally by size at a gallery. So, I've had artists tell me, well, that one's my favorite, so it should be,
Yep.
3 times as much. And that's just not how it really works. You know, it does feel kind of silly that the bigger painting is always more expensive, but that just is kind of how that is just kind of the industry standard. So, pricing incrementally kind of matches the size. With sculpture, that's kind of thrown out the window. Sculpture is a little trickier. Obviously, video, mixed media, that becomes like a whole other conversation, but particularly with painting, works on paper, it's always kind of proportionate to size.
We have 4 questions that have come through the Q&A, so I would like to address some of those. And Dustin, are you still good, or do you have to head out?
I'm actually got to run, but if there's
Okay.
one that's a pick point, is there a point, any point? What I will say is I invite all of you over the panel and all of the students to come by Pioneer Works and the studio's next door. And there's a big glass door and it's an open door. So I really, if you come into Brooklyn, just don't be shy, come in the studio and don't be shy. And I guess I would leave with it, you really gotta, if you want to make a living from your art, you just got you have to really just, I want to say, be relentless and unwavering and really not let, the outer world, when I make a piece of art, I say, can I live with it? Like, would I be stuck with this thing in my room? My children, I only have one, but even before I had a little daughter, her name's Zia Copernicus. I said, well, if I, would I put it in her room? And how will I feel about this in 100 years? So forget about what's happening right now or 25 years ago or 20, but like in a century, how does this fit into a system of storytelling and a system of objects and a system of ideas? And if I can live with that in 100 years, then I'm good to go, and I'm ready to die for this. So with
That's a
that,
pretty powerful note to leave on, Dustin.
with that, I send love, and I say, all of you that are on the call, we have a lot of work to do. And remember that, like, this is, the work isn't what we have to do to put more love in the world and to heal, you know, all these divisions and you know, what's so great about culture is that everyone can disagree. We all, you know, in the world, everyone disagrees about all this shit, right? But like, you put some Nina Simone on, and almost every single fucking person in the room is gonna be like, I love that. And then you can start to talk about the hard shit, right? So anyways,
Well,
thank you.
Dustin, I will say I love that you are here tonight, and I really deeply value the time you gave us. So
Well, I'll come
and,
up and see you one of these days soon.
thank you. It means a lot, Dustin. So thank you. Okay.
No, thank you all.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
So we're gonna let's dive into some of these other questions, and there's a lot of good ones here. The first one that had come in is, how critical is it to have an Instagram? Is there any way to be a fine artist without devoting your life to self-promotion on Instagram? And again, how do you do it? Because some people don't want to rely on it.
Jarrett, you know
I
that.
mean, I think, yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like even Moira said this, you can, you cannot, you know, it's just like, well, how do you want to spend your time? Like, some people really like going to the gallery openings. Like, people have made cool art careers by literally showing up every week to galleries and meeting people. And then like 2-3 years later, you're like, how did you get a solo show at Jack Shaman? You know what I mean? And it's
Right.
like, oh, because they just like really built these relationships, truly. You know, I feel like it's very seductive, you know, to do the Instagram thing. I feel like I'm personally trying to figure out how do I get 50,000 followers on Instagram? Like, that would be amazing. You know, I suck at like getting a good selfie and like doing all the like making sure the proportions are right and figuring out the best ways to get engagement. It's just, I feel like it's a different job, you know, it's a different kind of job. But if you are that person that's like, oh, I always am editing my photos, it's really easy for me to do that, then you should definitely be taking advantage of that. You have to do what your skill set allows you to do, but that doesn't mean not be on Instagram. I definitely feel like you should have an Instagram if you're trying to be an artist, because it's a visual platform and it's just so easy to connect with people when you go to these parties or you're at these events through Instagram. You know, I have sold paintings via Instagram. I have been invited to many opportunities via Instagram, having gallery shows, triennials around the world. Like, people, gallerists, curators, independent curators, institutions, really, when they have a hard time wanting to get in touch with artists, will slide into your DMs.
Yeah.
So, you know, have some DMs so they can slide into, have some work in your Instagram so they can see what you're actually doing. You know, it doesn't need to be 1,000 images, but it could be 15 really great ones,
Right.
you know?
I agree with that. I also think, you know, even I would almost treat Instagram, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but if you're someone who's not really into having like a social media presence and posting selfies and, you know, having your whole personal life out on Instagram, I would definitely treat Instagram as like an artist website almost, and just post photos of your work, connect with other artists on Instagram, connect with galleries, just use it like as a, you know, professional kind of platform. If you're really opposed to using Instagram, which I also completely respect and understand, I would make up for that kind of, I would make up for that by, you know, as Jarrett was saying, kind of being more present physically, and definitely getting people into your studio, because if people are not seeing your work on Instagram, they should be seeing it in real life, whether it's friends, artists, you know, people you invite. People need to be seeing your work somehow, whether it's online or in person.
But I just have to
And I would
piggyback.
just add, like, that's kind of, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say what you just said is, you know, getting people into your, like, ask people, like what you said is, I think sometimes people are scared to ask. And I think whether it's on Instagram or at a party or at an opening or wherever, you gotta ask, because, you know, if you don't ask, you're gonna be in that studio by yourself for a really long time. But and I think a lot of people, I think we're all curious and we're interested. And I think what you just said about, you know, getting people in, if whether you're on Instagram or not, just having other physical people in your studio.
Mhm.
I think you just have to ask, and if you don't feel comfortable, ask a friend or ask a colleague, and that's where networking, I think, really person to person, not even thinking about Instagram and all that stuff, just, asking people, asking your colleague, your friends.
Yeah.
People want to help each other, and if they don't, then you have to reevaluate that relationship. But
Right.
I think we all want to help each other.
But I also think, beyond just kind of professional development, like the whole like point of a lot of these things to me, whether it's connecting on Instagram or going to the opening or inviting people to the studio or kind of like being part of that dialogue, is about, bettering your work, about being part of dialogue with other artists, learning about other artists' work. I think sometimes like a kind of habit that I see is artists being so much, kind of self-centered in a certain way. Like it's all about me, like come to my studio, hear me talk about all these things here, and I think really what will benefit you, as Beth was talking about earlier, if other artists are friends with you, if you are, in a legitimate way, part of a community, other artists will back you up, and to their gallerist, they will say, oh my God, my friend so-and-so has an amazing thing in their studio I just saw last week. You have to go see it, but all of that has to come from genuine relationships. And as a gallerist myself, I've definitely had moments where, I love going to artist studios. I love visiting artists, but a lot of times people will come up and ask me for studio visits in ways that feel to me like very transactional. They'll come to the gallery, for example, and try to submit their work or say like, here's my website, here's a card I'm giving you. Oftentimes when people do that, they don't look at the show that we have on view. They don't know a single artist that we show. They don't know anything about the gallery. So they're essentially coming in and saying, what can you do for me? And it's like a little bit frustrating to have those kind of situations where it's like, if this person had been kind of more part of our ethos, more part of our social scene, had come to our openings, knew about our program, took even 3 minutes to look at the show that we had on view, that would mean so much more to me, because then I feel like they're coming to me specifically with like an educated kind of idea that we would connect, not just kind of, because of the gallery, not because of me specifically, but you get what I'm saying. Rather than just like, walking down Broadway, walking into every single gallery, throwing pasta at the wall and seeing what sticks kind of mentality. And I think that's really the same with inviting artists into your studio, friends. Like think about people who you're genuinely curious about their perspective on your work, and who, maybe you can also swap studio visits. Like I think that's an amazing thing to do. Yeah.
I also think,
That's
do your homework. Go to a gallery. Don't go to a gallery that doesn't show the kind of work you do. Like, I think
Yeah.
you need to research the galleries and do your homework, and then
Yeah.
go to a gallery. If the gallery is really small and then they're sending huge paintings, it might not work. So I think exactly like all that stuff, like know who you're connecting with. So then it makes you feel more so someone in a gallery doesn't say, we don't do that or we don't show that. Like, do your research a little bit, because I think that'll boost up your confidence too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This next question actually ties in extremely well to what you all are just talking about. The question is, I've heard that emerging artists have to be careful about where they show their work because it can pigeonhole you with other galleries that might not consider you because of those early choices. What are your thoughts on how to choose where you want to show and how this can impact your career?
This is so real. I feel like some artists, I have some artists, especially like British artists, who just will take forever to do a proper solo show. They're in the studio, they're meeting with everyone, they're going to all the galleries, but they are really, really particular about who they want to show with. And I feel like, especially for European artists, that tends to be the way it works. People tend to move a little bit slower, be a little bit more cautious. I feel like for artists in New York, I feel like we're like, every show is a good show, you know what I mean? And that's not true. I don't think that's true. But I think for most people though, that is true. I think it's very rare not very rare. I don't think it's that often where someone's going to be so totally offended about like your past, like I hate this gallery, or this gallery has a bad reputation. Your hope is that you should be asking your artist friends about the galleries that you're interested in working with, and hearing from your community about these people. I will say that people always have shit to say about galleries. You know what I mean? So like, no gallery is ever going to be perfectly unscathed. No, if someone says its gallery is perfect, I just can't even imagine. So you just have to like know what information to trust and what are your boundaries with galleries. You know what I mean? But in New York, I would say, like, especially when you're 22 and you're coming out of school and you're like, I want to apply to the open calls. I want to apply to, the residencies. I want to, like, my friend is having a show in Bushwick in this random house. Like, I think there's a lot of space and opportunity for that. You know what I mean? Especially as you're young, and especially as you're trying to build community.
Right.
I feel like as you have that first solo show with a gallery and with a serious gallery, you definitely start to be a lot more. You need to definitely start being a lot more discerning about what you do. You can't do everything with everybody, for sure. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Piggybacking off of that, like I think I would really, trust the person that you work with. I think there are a lot of galleries that have very bad reputations for good reason. I would, just as Jarrett was saying, I would definitely check with friends, check with other artists that have shown at that gallery. Does this gallery pay their artists on time? Things like that. I would definitely do your due diligence before doing like a big project. I would not be as discerning. I mean, still I would be discerning, but it's not as big of a deal if it's a big group show and you're just showing one piece. I think group shows are a great opportunity to kind of just get your name out there, keep showing. As far as like, oh, you showed with this gallery that treated you very well, but oh, maybe it's not such a cool gallery and you did a solo show, is that going to ruin future opportunities? I don't think so. I think the thing I would be more wary about is representation. And when a gallery hopefully asks you, would you like to be represented by us? That is something to be incredibly discerning about, because that is like, getting married to somebody. That's a very, that's a more serious conversation. But I think just have a solo show. If you feel that the gallery has, a good reputation in how they treat artists, that you feel good about, the gallerist's interpretation of your work, that you feel like it, people will actually come see the show, I wouldn't be so concerned about like, is this the hottest gallery in town? I think particularly when you're young, that isn't as important. And it shouldn't, obstruct other opportunities in the future.
There was another question. I think we answered it. I'm older. I'm a graduate of 1977. How do I find a gallery you trust? And I think we've already been addressing it. It's so much about talking to others. And really, you made such a great point, Moira. If you're ever represented by a gallery, it's like getting married. It's that intense, and you want to do a lot. You want to spend time with this. You don't want to jump into it. You want to be really careful with it, and you want to make a really good decision if it reaches that point. So.
Yeah, I would definitely, as far as representation goes, I would definitely dip your toe in. Like if a gallerist is interested in your work, like I would first do a group show. Maybe include a single piece at an art fair. Maybe you could do a solo show and see how it goes. But I would definitely, throughout all of those moments, think about, just basic things like how smooth was this process? Like, did I feel taken care of? Did I feel like these people represented me well, and my work well? Did they pay me on time? Did they sell anything? Did they, did any press come out? Was this a good experience? And if it wasn't, then I would definitely be wary about representation. I know it can be a really tempting kind of, to feel desired in that way, and to, for a gallerist to say like, we love your work and we really want to show you more officially. But I would definitely be careful in that scenario.
I think like all these, you said it's a marriage, and it's a marriage and it's a relationship, like I always think whatever, would you be friends with that person? Would you, it's so, I keep using the word intimate, but I feel like it is. Yeah. It's like your work that you're spending all your time making. And if someone doesn't respect that, you definitely don't want to show it them. But all the things like we've all seen galleries that have closed, paid people, or gallery, people that didn't really respect people, or people that didn't try to do the best that they could. We always tell people the one thing we always guarantee is we promise we'll do a great installation, a great show. We promise we'll have a great opening. We're going to hope for a review, and we're going to hope we sell stuff, but we can always promise that we'll share we'll do the best we can. And then it's disappointing if someone doesn't sell stuff or you don't get a review, but you can't promise those, but you can promise the other parts. And I think that's a really important thing. If a gallery can promise that, at least that's a good start.
Right.
Yeah, and beyond the bare minimum, like representation too, like I really think about it from the perspective of, the gallery is taking a cut from sales, and like they should be doing really hard work for you in order to justify that. Of course, galleries have overhead costs and all these things, but the gallery, beyond your show, the gallery should be thinking about opportunities for you. If you are a represented artist, they should be connecting you to people. They should be, it's not just, oh, you had one show and then we're going to totally ignore you for 2 years until your next show. It should be an ongoing kind of back and forth dialogue, support. The gallerist should be coming to visit you, thinking about press opportunity. It's like a whole kind of thing. And if you don't feel that someone is going to give their all for you, then I would also be hesitant, because sometimes what I've seen too is that, that a gallery will do an amazing first show and then kind of just drop off and not really do that much for their artists. And I think that's really a shame.
And it's okay to advocate yourself for a gallery too. Like if you feel that, I think sometimes, artists feel like, oh, I don't know, I shouldn't say anything, but I think it's really okay to feel like if you do have a gallery and all the things that you just said, that if the gallery isn't doing that for you, you can, find out why and encourage
Have a conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're saying, it's a marriage, and
It is.
like you're saying, it's a marriage, and it requires communication. You know what I mean? And I definitely feel like even with my galleries, I'm like, okay, so this happened. This is what I need. I don't enjoy the way y'all communicating about this. I love the way y'all communicate about this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you just have to be honest too, because for me, this is how I keep my lights on. So it's really important to me that, that they're taking it as seriously as I am, and you just have to really try to, like you said, advocate for yourself, because if not, no one else is going to advocate for you sometimes.
Totally. This is like slightly unpopular opinion of me to say this, but I will. I also have had the flip side of that where, I deeply care about the artists that I work with, and I always have. Not all gallerists do. Or not all gallerists like put in like a lot of effort sometimes. But anyway, I have also had the flip side of that where artists are just texting me all night, calling me, constantly, I need this, I need this, I need this. And I think like a marriage, it has to be respectful on both sides. And, we're people too. And like, we also have personal lives and things going on.
Balance, right?
And yeah, it can get a little crazy sometimes, but I mean, I think if anyone, just myself, speaking from my own perspective, if anyone approached me and was like, I really am hoping for press this year, is there anything you can do? Or like, let's talk about this. Like, how can we work on this together, or I'm really hoping to be in a group show this year in Europe. Like, do you know anyone? Can you connect me with someone? I mean, that's amazing. Like, I absolutely love having these conversations. And sometimes you do need that little push to like understand what an artist is looking for. I definitely would not be shy to have conversations like that, whether you're represented or not. If you're having a show, especially a solo show at a gallery, you can say like, I happen to know this person at this press, organization. Like, can you please tell them about my show? I am really hoping to sell this one piece, or I really, I think it's totally, I think it's helpful and encouraged to, in a respectful way, say what you want. Yeah.
I mean, I love the questions that you're asking, because I think the questions that my artist friend, my brother and I especially, are like, what should we even be asking our gallery for? Like sometimes like, I feel like we need to be asking for more stuff. So I've been like talking to my artist friends who have gallery representation. It's like, what are y'all asking for? What I think I should be expecting more from my gallery. I think they can be doing more for me. And like, you know, and I mean, that was just so revealing. And I was like, oh yeah, like they helped me do this, they helped me do that, they helped me do this other thing. And it's just like, oh, right, like this is their job, you know what I mean? And they do have these resources. And it doesn't look like the moon, it doesn't look like the stars, but it can look like something like, oh, I'm doing this performance in the park and I need a fake wall built. You know what I mean? Can y'all help me get a fake wall built in this park so that I can do this hair painting? You know what I mean? And they did that.
Interrupt you, Garrett, and just say, I always think about this, and I think you all think about this too. Like, if we didn't have the artists, we'd be sitting in like empty space. And so sometimes I think people forget, like, it's a relationship. And if we don't have the artists, we got nothing. And so if the artists, you know, you need to advocate for yourself, and you need to know, like, we need you and you need us. So it has to be, I don't know when, it's just kind of, it's that relationship and it's a relationship with the people that are looking and buying the art. Those, you know, people always say, what is this all about? And I always think
Right.
it comes back to a relationship with no matter with the people that are going to look at the art, the curators, the museums, the press. It's all relationship building, and we're all responsible for taking care of the artists that we work with. And I think sometimes everybody forgets that, and I think the artists forget that too. And you know, that's what we're supposed to do. That's our job. Like, you make it, we're supposed to make sure it gets out there.
You know, all the conversation this evening has centered so much around relationships, people, community, trust, genuineness, respect on both sides. It's really, maybe I shouldn't say this, but many of the comments tonight are almost contradictory to what people first think about the gallery world and the fine art world. And it's, for me, always really exciting and really refreshing to bring it back down to these really critical and really important factors in the mix. I do want to honor both the time, because we are nearing the end, and then some of the remaining questions to wrap them out. So I think we really addressed this next one. Why is it such a bad thing to have lower prices after a few years? And we talked about that quite a bit. Lower to start, not to jump up to a high price, but your prices will go up, and they should go up. You know, as Moira indicated, many galleries might increase by 20%, but if someone's saying we should increase by 300%, you should really start to question that. Any other comments about that? But I think we've addressed that one pretty well.
I think the issue if prices go lower is that then people who bought your work at a higher price will feel, if they know about it, if you're, you know, selling so much work that people know about it, people will feel uncomfortable, I guess, buying. I don't know. I mean, it all depends. Obviously, there's so many people who buy work because they truly love it and they have no intention of it appreciating in value, but there also are collectors, museums, I don't know, all kinds of people who buy work and hope that it appreciates in value, whether they intend to sell it in the future or not. You know, it's just like, I invested $5,000 in this piece and now it's only worth $1,000. Why did I pay, you know, $5,000 2 years ago for this? And I think it's complicated as well for, I think it's just complicated for longevity. I think for an artist career, like, I think it's usually that would not happen at the same gallery. So like, you know, with represented artists that we work with, like, we would not lower anyone's prices. So we're pretty confident when we raise someone's prices that is, I mean, we are completely confident that that is what their new price is. Like, I think, yeah, it's kind of difficult to like exactly pinpoint like the exact reason, but yeah, it's not, it shows like that people are not as interested in your work, or that like someone made a mistake in pricing your work in the past. And I think it's best to avoid those kind of categorizations.
Yeah. So we are running out of time and my voice is getting worse. So on that squeaky note, there's one of the remaining questions. One just came in though, that I think is kind of a wonderful way to end, because it's a big question. And it's, what are the panelists' thoughts about the future of galleries? Are there new models and ways of working on the horizon? And I think that's kind of fantastic way to end this discussion. So your perspectives on that.
I think one of the things that has changed in the years is what we talked about before. You know, there are other ways of looking at it. I think the art fairs have really changed how people look and buy and show art. I think I can imagine that's just going to continue. It's hard to know. I mean, we're hoping that people still come to galleries, but you know, I've done this for a long time and I noticed that not as many people come as used to, and people are looking at what we talked about, like Instagram and other things. So for the future, I think we just hope that people still make art and still people come to see it, because it's such an important, there's nothing like seeing something in the real, you know, in real life. Seeing a painting or a drawing or a sculpture and being able to look at it from all different angles and not just on a flat screen.
It reminds me a little bit of how people felt about theater, like with all of the forms of entertainment. And in a way, I think theater has had a revival because it is truly experience, right? And this realization, the same about books, you know, well, books still exist and the desire to buy books. So I hope the same is true, to go to the gallery, be in the gallery, be with the work, for sure. And for Jarrett and Moira, any thoughts on this final question?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, I talk about galleries as luxury stores. They are luxury stores, and that's amazing. You know, and I feel like, you know, and I love that for artists that can take advantage of selling their objects to these luxury stores. But then I think, like, you know, outside of that too, like, not having that be the only model that's prioritized and respected, you know, collectives showing work, presenting work, selling work together is amazing. You know what I mean? I feel like obviously there's like all the NFT and all the kind of like digital, there's all these digital footprint track blockchain things that people are doing with artworks now, so that, you know, they have like a longer licensing and royalties commitment and contracts and agreements. But I definitely feel like, you know, I'm hoping that it just gets a little bit more decentralized. And, you know, what is art? Where should art be shown? Everywhere, you know? I wish that, you know, I hope that we start just like supporting artists like they do in Germany. Like, there should be more money for artists just to be able to make art, live as artists, respected as a business, respected, different prices for healthcare. You know what I mean? Like, having a lifestyle set up and a quality of life for artists to make work too, as a huge shift in the market, will have a huge shift in the market. You know, people will have more agency. People aren't just rushing to do the first thing they see, because they're not so stressed about just eating. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I
And really
think-
well said.
I completely agree. And like Jarrett clearly has experience in this. I have like limited experience in this, but I think, you know, to some extent, like, take things into your own hands. Like, I think, you know, I have this, you know, mini curatorial initiative, but, you know, it wasn't really a commercial project in any dimension, but it was so important just to like get people to see this amazing work that people I knew were making. And you never know where those things can go. Like, I think you don't need to rent a brick and mortar. You can do a show really anywhere. You know, you can, there's all kinds of incredible projects that I've seen, some of the best, you know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in New York, there's all these, you know, like shows in like some, you know, derelict basement in Chinatown, you know, someone has like access to some kind of crazy space, and you never know. People might, you know, put on a totally incredible show in an unusual setting and just make do with what they can. And I mean, in my personal experience, I feel so like lucky and honored to have had this experience, but I put on a show with an artist through my Octagon project, totally bare bones, like in an apartment. It was like, yeah, super shoestring budget, you know. We put so much blood, sweat, and tears into it. It was a huge thing, but huge effort. But, you know, I didn't really expect that many people would come see it. So many people came, and I found out years later that someone who saw that show ended up working at MIT List, and like put on this artist show, first museum show at MIT List. And like, just because they happened to come to this random apartment,
Right.
and, you know, I wasn't selling work in any dimension. It wasn't a commercial thing in any way, but I just created that opportunity because I really felt strongly, and so did the artist, that this work just needed to be seen. And I think young people who have the energy to do things like that should always do things like that. And I really hope that that never ends. And I think that's not really like a new model for galleries. I think commercial galleries, I mean, in many ways, sadly, are becoming increasingly commercial. There's new art fairs every single year. Like my gallery participates in 8. I know David's Werner participates in like 40.
Right.
It's really, really intense. Like the commercialization of art is insane right now. But don't let that, you know, jade you or kind of, you know, distract you from like the reasons that you started making art in the first place, because, you know, it's just about expressing yourself, expressing ideas, and like starting conversation and showing people, you know, what you've been making. And I think you don't need a gallery really at all to do that. So
That is a perfect, beautiful note to end on. All, you know, for the 3 of you, and then with Dustin, it really was a fantastic array of insights. And I'm so grateful again that you could participate tonight and provide our attendees with these really beautiful perspectives and that bring it back to this really genuine core again. So thank you for being here tonight. For those attending, thank you for staying through the program. And I hope you gained a lot from it. I do every single time. And it makes me just excited for artists to be making their work and getting it up. So great, thank you. And we're going to conclude on that note.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Jarrett.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take
Bye.
care.